Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Seancee show. This video is coming a little bit later than I wanted it to, than I planned, but at the same time, it is what it is. It kind of worked out. These 13 books that I have, as you can tell from the title, are for the tropical autumn transition between summer and fall, and I just called it tropical autumn because Southern California does not really have an official fall. If you know, you know. It doesn't really cool down, and then we have like fires in October and November, and although it does sort of start cooling down, it doesn't really get below 70 at the lowest, except at night. That's why I called it tropical autumn, because it's still kind of tropical here in Southern California. And I do want to create a more curated list for October and what you can read in October, but these books, except for like 5 of them, which I'll talk about when I get to them, these books are more for autumn in general, so September, October, and November. First up on the list is Mirror Mirror, A Disney Twisted Tale by Jen Kalanita. This, as you can tell, is a Twisted Tale, part of the Disney Twisted Tales series, specifically focusing on Snow White. But the basic premise of this book is, what if the evil queen had poisoned the prince instead of Snow White? This was not my favorite Disney Twisted Tale. Like, out of the ones that I have read this one, Go the Distance, Almost There, and When You Wish Upon a Star. I would say that this book and Go the Distance are tied at 3rd place for me, just because I saw the potential in this book, and which is why I'm including it in this list, and maybe some people will enjoy it more than I did. I saw the potential in this book, but there were a few pitfalls, downfalls to it. The first one being basically right off the bat within like the first chapter, within the prologue, which I would say avoid. You basically go right into the action and you're kind of close to the conclusion of the story, and then you backtrack in time, and I don't think that was a smart move for this story on the part of the author, because it would have been nice to build up to that. That was the main complaint that I had, and it wasn't really fully living up to the potential that I would have hoped with this book. And Snow White is one of my favorite princesses, and as I said, again, having a lot of the climactic stuff happen at the beginning of the book made the ending a little anticlimactic, because you kind of know what's gonna happen, or what's the start of what's gonna happen. It was a little bit anticlimactic by the end. The second book is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I feel like I've recommended this in a previous seasonal transition video. This, again, just with the whole mystery aspect of it, it really fits well as a good autumn book and a good transition book from summer to autumn. In The Count of Monte Cristo, we follow the story of Edmond Dantes, who, before he can get married to his fiancée, is arrested on the basis of treason, and he's falsely accused of treason because he had interacted a little bit with Napoleon Bonaparte. He is falsely accused of treason because of that and sent to prison on Chateau d'If. There he meets a father, a priest, who tells him the location of the lost treasure of Monte Cristo. Next up is The 3 Lives of Alex St. Pierre by Natasha. I would recommend all of her books in every video if I could, but this one is especially suited to the summer to fall transition, also very fitted to both summer and fall. But in this story, we are following Alex St. Pierre, who grew up in the glamours of Hollywood, and then later, because of her talking skills essentially, catches the eye of the US government during World War II, and she is sent to Switzerland to be a spy. And once the Allies win World War II, she moves to Paris and is working for Christian Dior in Dior House and setting up a new exhibit for Christian Dior. And then an aspect of her life from being a spy in Switzerland comes to haunt her, and she has to essentially get rid of it. This is probably my absolute favorite by Natasha, and I feel like I say that after every book I read by her. I feel like Alex St. Pierre is the epitome of what women want in a fictional female character, and her relationship with her friends and romantic interests are all really well written out, which I really appreciated from Natasha Lester. Next up is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I don't have a copy of Cersei anymore because I'm waiting for Barnes & Noble to come out with a special edition of it like it did for The Song of Achilles, this edition. I'm waiting for this type of edition for Cersei, which I hope comes out soon because I need it and I want it to match. Barnes & Noble, please and I honestly prefer Cersei over Song of Achilles. Enough of that though. Basically in Cersei, we are following the tale of, as you can probably guess, Cersei, who is a nymph and the daughter of Helios and Perse, and this book takes heavy inspiration from Odysseus's encounter with Cersei in the Odyssey, and it expands a little bit more on Cersei's role in the Odyssey and tells it from her perspective and tells her story from her perspective, from Cersei's perspective. As I said, I honestly prefer this book over the Song of Achilles. I think for me, a large part of it was the fact that it felt a little bit, not that it felt more real to me, but it was a little bit easier for me to connect with the story and get invested in it. I did really like the Song of Achilles as well, but Cersei just felt a little bit more easier to invest in. Next up, I'm recommending five books in one in this recommendation. It's the Never After novels, the Never After series by Emily McIntire. So there's Hooked, which is inspired by Peter Pan and Captain Hook. There is Scarred, which is inspired by The Lion King and Scar. There's Wretched, which is inspired by The Wizard of Oz and The Wicked Witch of the West. There's Twisted, which is inspired by Aladdin and Jafar. And there's Crossed, which is inspired by The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Frollo. I'm only going to hold up Hooked for right now, just so I can show one of them as a representation for the whole series. This is a series of standalones that is basically surrounding the premise of dark adult contemporary romance centered around the villains from these respective tales. I want to say Disney, but The Wizard of Oz isn't Disney, so. And one thing that Emily McIntire stresses with this series is that these aren't retellings and that these are just inspired by their respective stories. And another thing I will strongly suggest is if you have any triggers, especially in relation to dark romance, please go to her website to check out trigger warnings, content warnings, because these are dark romances, so these will touch heavy romantic topics, darker romantic topics. Emily McIntire in her little author's note does say that she would prefer you to go in blind, but I do not recommend going in blind into these stories if you have triggers. So I will link her website down below in the description, so please go check it out if you're interested in this series but want to know the triggers. This series I actually have not read. I am reading Hooked right now, but I have not read the rest of the series, but I do want to recommend it because I do really like the whole premise of dark contemporary romance books centering around the villains of respective stories, while at the same time not giving the villains redemption arcs. Next up is The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. This is set in 1873, the late 19th century, and we're basically following a young girl who is trying to investigate her sister's death. Her sister was heavily involved with the Seance Society and one specific spiritualist who is very well known in the society and within the wider world beyond spiritualism. So this book has slight tones of sapphic lesbian romance, which I really appreciated. This is very subtle in its romance vibes and its sapphic vibes, but it is 100% there. It's subtle in the sense that it's not a lot and it's not right in your face, but once you get to certain parts, you're like, okay, I see you. I see what you're doing here. This is a great book for October because the spiritualism, the seances, the talking with ghosts, the murder mystery, really good book to get into for October specifically, but fall in general. Next up is River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. And this is about a mother who escapes a Jim Crow-esque setting right when Jim Crow starts to come into effect, where slavery is basically over, but at the same time, all former enslaved people have to stay on their respective farms, their respective plantations for a certain number of years before they are allowed to leave. Our main character runs off to try to find her children that were taken away from her and sent to other plantations, other farms, etc. This is another book that I would 100% look into trigger warnings for if you need them, because this does talk about some very heavy topics, but it is a very touching story and definitely something that I feel more people should talk about and read. And then last but not least is Bravely by Maggie Stiefvater. This is actually something I'm kind of surprised that not a lot of people talk about with how popular Maggie Stiefvater is with the Raven Boys books. I think it's the Raven Cycle series. I'm not quite sure because this is the only book I've read by her, but I'm kind of surprised more people haven't read this considering considering how big of a fan base she has. This basically follows Merida. It's essentially a sequel to the Pixar movie Brave. Within a certain amount of time, within a year specifically, Merida has to help her family start changing because things have been changing all around them, but her family has kind of remained stagnant, have remained the same. We have two main gods, Scottish gods, Gaelic gods, who come into play in the story, one for life and one for death and destruction, specifically destruction actually. Merida basically comes to an agreement with them that if after 1 year her family, the clan of Dunbrach, do not change, then the god of destruction will bring down the clan of Dunbrach. We basically get the 4 different seasons. It starts with winter and ends with fall, so we get winter, spring, summer, fall, into the end of fall, which I think is absolutely perfect for this time of year. That's the end of this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.